Greetings, my friends, and welcome to Health and Healing, Episode 7, The Breath of Life. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Hess, and Health and Healing is brought to you by the Scott Valley Seventh-day Adventist Church. In this episode, we will be talking about air quality and breathing, and so, of course, I've entitled it The Breath of Life. The Bible, as you may know, describes how God created mankind by making a body and then breathing into that body the breath of life. And it says that at that moment, man became a living soul. Think about that for a second. A body, the breath is breathed into the body by God, and man becomes a living soul. That's really exciting. And every one of us knows how important it is to breathe. In fact, if you don't breathe, you will die in a few minutes. So every moment we have to be breathing to exchange oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other gases. Those are the two primary ones that we think about. So as you all know, breathing is important, fresh air is important, everyone knows that, I think, but it's surprising how few people actually act as if it's important and how few people actually know how to breathe properly. We get into so many bad habits. So I'm going to give you some exercises and demonstrate proper breathing technique for you. But first, we're going to look at some literature, some studies that have been done. And as you know, as we're filming this video in 2021, we are in somewhere in a pandemic, and there's a respiratory virus that's going around. And one of the things that has been tried to reduce the transmission of the virus is putting on masks. And there's been a lot of discussion about whether that's helpful or not and how it affects the breathing. And interestingly, the CDC actually published a study looking at schools in a certain area of the United States and comparing different things that were done to see what actually helped reduce the transmission of the virus. And they found, very interestingly, that masking the school children did not help, or they couldn't show that it actually helped to reduce the transmission of the virus. Strangely, they found that masking the adults, the teachers and the assistants in the schools, actually helped to reduce transmission. But that's a whole different topic. The reason I'm bringing this study up is because one of the most significant things that they found was that increasing ventilation in the schoolrooms reduced the transmission. In fact, 35% reduction in transmission by opening windows, opening doors, and using fans to circulate the air. 35% reduction in transmission, where they failed to find any reduction by using masks. So it's very clear that ventilation, getting fresh air into our living spaces, is critically important. Additionally, they found that if they used HEPA filters, that is high efficiency particulate absorbing filters, in addition to ventilation, that it gave additional benefit, and they were able to show a 48% reduction in the transmission of the virus. So that's all about that I'm going to say about that one. There are many other studies looking at air quality and its effects on our health. Not surprisingly, there's a number of studies showing bad effects from living near a freeway. Now you could guess that because I don't know if you've ever sat by a freeway and smelled the fumes, but that's not really good quality air. Well, it turns out that it increases the risk of asthma in children. That's not a surprise. But it also increases heart disease in adults, increases the risk of emphysema, significantly increases the risk of Alzheimer's, dementia, Parkinson's disease, and multiple sclerosis. And this is really fascinating. You know, there's been a lot of debate about the rise in rates of autism over the last 20 to 30 years, maybe close to 40 years now. If you look at the graphs on the rise of rates of autism in the United States, it is quite alarming. And some people have speculated it was due to vaccines and other things. Well, in one particular study, they found that children born to mothers who live near a freeway are about 2.5 times more likely to develop autism compared to children whose mothers lived far away from the freeway. 2.5 times increased risk of autism by living close to a freeway. And of course, that's a correlation, but the thinking is that probably there's some causation there related to the pollutants in the air next to the freeway. So that's it for the studies. What can we do about it? Well, first of all, don't live next to a freeway or other large source of pollution. And interestingly, inside our homes and offices, we have a lot of pollutants, and so we need to open the windows and the doors and let the fresh air in. That may be less true if you live in a highly polluted urban area, in which case you should move, get out into the country where there's fresh air. So open the windows and doors. Exercise, we've talked about exercise before. One of the key benefits of exercising is it gets us breathing better, and we should do that outdoors whenever possible, regardless of the weather, unless you're in danger of your lungs literally freezing from breathing the air. You should go outside. If it's cold, put on a jacket, put on a hat if you must, but go out and breathe the fresh air. And so now about breathing. Breathing is how we move air in and out of our lungs. We need to take in oxygen. We need to get rid of carbon dioxide. And doing that in an efficient manner is very important. So everyone knows that, but I've found that most people don't really practice it in a healthy way. So before I get to the actual details, I just want to point out one other thing. Our breathing is connected to our brain function. Did you know that? You probably do know that. For example, think about when you get anxious or scared or panicked about something, what happens to your breathing? Most people find that their breathing becomes shallow and rapid, or they hold their breath. And either one of those is less than optimal for respiration and for physical function. And it also is connected with the anxiety in our brain. So we find as human beings that it's difficult to directly change our mental state, our mood, our emotions, but we can purposely change our breathing, and that affects the neurochemistry in our brain and leads us to be more calm and relaxed. So we're going to look at I drew out some diagrams here for us to help visualize the breathing, but I want to say first of all a couple of things. Generally speaking, we should breathe through our nose, not our mouth. Okay, there's a number of reasons for that. It has to do with humidification of the air, warming of the air, filtering out particulates and droplets that are in the air that we don't want in our lungs. There's other things too, we won't go into those today. But breathe through the nose, and we should have good posture. If we slouch, that cramps the lungs and the entire breathing apparatus. And we find out that slouching keeps us from breathing properly. So we want to sit up, we want to have good posture. I'm just going to demonstrate that. If I slouch down like this, I can't even take in a full breath. It's only a partial breath. If I take in a full breath, that actually fixes my posture. So one way to help fix your posture is purposely fill your lungs as full as you can. Keep your spine in that erect posture, and then allow your rib cage and your abdomen to move as you breathe. So you'll notice, for example, as I breathe, that my chest expands and my abdomen expands. That's because the diaphragm is between the chest and the abdomen, and it's actually contracting and pushing the abdominal contents down and the abdomen out in order to pull air into the lungs. Okay? So notice my chest and my abdomen as I breathe. Okay? So now let's go back to the situation where a person may be anxious or panicking, and what happens to the breathing, that rapid shallow breathing. I've illustrated that here. Green is for breathing in, the red is breathing out, and this is the pattern we often see. And often people are mouth breathing at that point. So instead of trying to go directly from this to what I think is a more ideal form of breathing, which I call sine wave breathing, we'll come back to that in a minute. Instead of going from this to that, it's sometimes helpful to go through a progression of what I call linear, because it's just back and forth, to what has been called a triangle breath to a rectangle breath. So I'll just illustrate that. But here, when we breathe in, we're going to insert a pause before we exhale. So it looks like this. So breathing in, hold that breath in, breathe out, and then in right away. Okay? Then, after a few breaths like this, we're going to insert a pause after we exhale. So it's going to look like this. So you notice just that if you've been following along with me, you'll notice that you feel more calm. You feel that I'm calmer when I'm doing this box breathing, or square breathing as it's called. Many people will say that this is ideal, or that this is the way to stop anxiety, and I will say it's good, it's part of the progression, but then we need to go from here. We start rounding off these edges, and we can make it circular breathing, which I don't call it that because we use that for a different type of breathing for wind instrument players. But so I call it sine wave breathing. So we round off the edges here, and we slow it down, and it looks like this. And this is what I want you to actually practice a couple of times a day. Breathing in, and for some people, it feels like the waves at the ocean. I don't know if you've ever sat at the beach, watch the waves come in, and there's this little time where it slows down, and it stops, and then it starts going out again. It goes a little bit faster, and then it stops and reverses and comes in again. And I sometimes like to visualize it like that, and it just is part of nature, and so is our breathing. So that's a good idea to practice. And what I recommend is in the morning sometime, and probably again in the evening, just for a couple of minutes. Find a place to sit where it's quiet and calm, preferably outside, ideally with the sunshine, in a place where you can sit with good posture and breathe. And I like to do this. I just watch what's happening outside, listen to the birds, watch the sunrise, watch the leaves falling off the trees, or the butterflies, or whatever is out there in nature. And just breathe. It's okay to open your mouth sometimes, but generally we want to be nose breathing. And what you'll find if you practice this, I challenge you to actually do this week, practice this at least every morning, ideally again in the evening, for a minute, maybe build it up to 2, 3, 4 minutes at a time. What you will find is that during the day, as you're going about your day, you will find yourself slouching and not breathing deeply. You'll just notice that. And when you notice that, take a deep breath and then get back into your sine wave breathing pattern of slow, deep breathing, and then go on about your day. And you'll also find that if you do have anxiety or you get into situations where you're breathing that shallow, rapid breathing, either due to anxiety or due to physical exertion, once you stop, you can go through that progression we talked about, from linear to the triangle breathing to square breathing to sine wave breathing, and it helps you get back the control of your breathing and also the control of your emotions at the same time. So that's it for breathing. I think that's enough for you to work on for this week. Please subscribe, like, share the video. If you found it to be helpful, please share it with others. That way we can get this information out to people that need it. There's a lot of people out there that need to have all of this information about health and healing that we're sharing. So if you want to be notified when we do our next video, also hit the little bell and you'll receive a notification when we upload a new video. Next week we will be addressing the topic of rest. And rest is critical as part of the balance between activity and rest. And so that's all I'm going to say about that, but we'll get into more detail next week. Until then, may God bless you, and remember, breathe.